I will speak you about the decaf coffee, the decaffeination methods, and what is the differences in the several methods of decaffeination used, and its effect in the quality of the cup. We will start speaking about caffeine, because caffeine is the substances that we want to eliminate, to extract from the coffee. The caffeine is an alkaloid that is present not only in coffee, as you know. It's a mild stimulant of the nervous system, and it's up to 400 milligrams per day is the advice that the European Food Safety Authority set for a safe consumption of caffeine without side effects. And so it acts as an antagonist of the adenosine. But if you have an excessive assumption of caffeine, so if you go over 1 grams per day, approximately 10 cups, it depends of what cups are you drinking. But they can cause some side effects as overexcitation and sleeping difficulties. So the suggested consumption is 4 cups of espresso per day. But you have to consider also all the possible sources of caffeine. Now I have this slide take from Coffee and Health, where you have all the concentration of the milligrams per cup that you can assume from different sources of caffeine. So if you have in mind the limit of the advice of 400 milligrams per day, you have to add all the single sources. So you have for an espresso, mainly the average is 60 milligrams, a little bit more in my opinion. And in the decaf coffee, you have, for example, 3 milligrams per cup. So it's difficult that if you drink also a high quantity of decaf coffee, you can arrive to the quantity of 400. Caffeine so has a dose-depending action. The consumption is not only on coffee, but also with soft drinks. And it does not create tolerance or addiction. So it's a substance that also if you drink usually during the day, also if you stop the consumption of caffeine, you don't have some side effects as some drugs, and it is not considered as a drug, but it's important that during the day you don't go over the quantity of 400 milligrams set by the European Food Standard Agency. So the drinking of decaf coffee is a solution for the people that like drinking many coffees per day. So you drink the coffee also because you like drinking the coffee. And there are also people with health problems that have not to renounce to the pleasure, to the coffee taste of the coffee. There is also a strong reduction in the content of waxes with decaf coffee for the system that uses methylene chloride as a solvent for the extraction, eliminates also the waxes contained in the coffee that can be irritating, that can give an irritation for the gastric mucosa. So if you want to define what is the decaf coffee is a coffee where almost all the caffeine has been removed, but after an extraction process, because it does not exist a plant that produces no caffeine. It exists a plant, but there is no a big production, and so you cannot have a cup of coffee prepared with this type of coffee. So you need to extract the coffee from with an industrial process. The residual caffeine content has to be below 0.1% in Europe, so to have the 3 or 4 milligrams per cup, or 97% of removal in the United States. It's almost the same limit at the end. and there is no human's influence on human physiology at these concentrations. There are several decaffeination methods because there are, in the history of decaffeination, many experiments were performed to try to obtain the best system to extract the caffeine with the aim to have a good quality cup as a result. And so they are performed in industrial plants. There are 4 methods available depending on which substance is used to extract caffeine. There are also other substances that can be used that are allowed to extract caffeine, but in the world are 4 the methods that are used as an industrial in the industries. And so each method gives a slight different aromatic profile of the coffee depending on the method used, but also depending on the blend that you use. So the difference is more from the blend that you use than from the solvent that you use. There are some common steps to all the methods. It is the swelling of the green bean at the beginning, then the phase of extraction, then the steam stripping and the solvent recovery, where you use a chemical solvent, the regeneration of the absorbents if you use other methods as water decaffeination, the drying at the end of the to take again the coffee to the moisture level set by the legislation, because for the green coffee in Italy you have a limit of 13%. Instead, for the decaf coffee the limit is 11%, so lower, because it can be affected from the attack of the molds. So you need to have a coffee that have a less content of moisture. And then the final part of testing. The swelling, you expand the beans, and then the cell structure stretches, and so water begins the extraction. So there is the solubilization of the complex of caffeine, potassium chlorogenate. Then there is the phase of the extraction. This is the difference between the several methods. So coffee undergoes the solvent action, and this it can be performed in a batch extraction or with a continuous flow. Then there is the solvent recovery. So all the solvent is recuperated and can be used again for financial, legal, and ecological reasons. And then there is the steaming of the coffee to eliminate the traces of solvent if necessary, if there is a low limit set for a maximum level of solvent in the coffee. And then the caffeine recovery. If you use the water decaffeination, there is you need to regenerate the adsorbents with thermal regeneration with loss of caffeine, or chemical regeneration, and then in which you can recover the caffeine. The last phase is the drying, so coffee comes back to its original moisture content to avoid the possible proliferation of molds. The testing, you have to test, as we discussed before, the caffeine content, the residual solvent, or the moisture content. The 4 different methods are water, ethyl acetate, carbon dioxide, supercritical or liquid, or dichloromethane. Then now we will see all the methods in the detail. The water has the advantage that is a good acceptance by consumers, but it's not selective for caffeine, because you extract caffeine and also other substances on the green beans, because all the decaffeination are performed on the green beans before roasting. With water, you extract also some important substances soluble in water that are very, very important for the formation of the aroma in the following roasting process. And so, in this case, you need to do something in order to inhibit the extraction of these other substances. This is performed using a batch of water you put in contact with the coffee, so you extract the caffeine and these substances that are soluble in water. Then the water is passed to a filter of activated carbons, and these carbons retain the caffeine. So you obtain a big quantity of water that is full of substances, pre-aromatic substances, that you will use as a solvent in the following steps. So if you put in contact this water with coffee, this water will extract only caffeine and not these other substances, water solubles. Another method is the ethyl acetate, that is a solvent that is selective for caffeine, so it removes only the caffeine and not other substances, and is present in fruit and therefore is well accepted. But it has some problems because it is flammable and explosive, so there is an increase of the production costs because it's quite difficult to manage. And sometimes the coffee could retain part of the fruity smell of the solvent, because one of the aims of decaffeination is to maintain the aromatic profile of the coffee before and after decaffeination. So if you have a coffee that smells of fruity, it's something that maybe you don't want in your coffee. So this is a limit of this technology. Another technology is supercritical or liquid carbon dioxide. If you use carbon dioxide that is naturally present in the air, but at these conditions, it is not selective for caffeine. So you need to have high pressures, as 70 atmospheres for the liquid or 250 atmospheres for the supercritical state, in order to have a carbon dioxide selective for caffeine. You need a large-scale production necessary to be economically viable, so you have very, very big lots. And this is good for the big industries, but not good for the small industries. And in the case of liquid carbon dioxide, the time of extraction is very long. We take off some days, almost 1 week, to decaffeinate one lot of decaf. The last is the dichloromethane, that is highly selective for caffeine and has a low boiling point. And it's easy to remove after the process. You have a low amount of energy required if compared with other methods, because there is a reduced loss of energy because the pressure is lower. And then it extracts also other substances as ochratoxin, trichloronizole, and geosmin in the case of the Demus process. And it appears to be, at the moment, the most widespread, because you have the best quality cup and the lowest price on the market. This is a diagram of how a decaffeination plant works. So you charge the coffee in the machine. You put it in contact with steam for the steaming. It is the first part of the process. Then you discharge the water. You can transfer the coffee to another tank, and then you put in contact with the solvent. This is set for the dichloromethane and the ethyl acetate process. Then the solvent extracts the caffeine, and the solvent is discharged, and then it is distillated, and you can recover the solvent that can be used again for another cycle. And then you can recover the caffeine after the distillation of the solvent. 2 words about GMO coffee or natural decaf. So there exist some plants producing beans without caffeine, but we are very far from being available on the coffee market, because caffeine is a self-defense of the coffee plant. So if a plant has not caffeine, it can be attacked from all the bacteria, and you cannot have a high production, a high yield of production in your coffee farm. GMO is not well accepted by consumers, and the cup quality has to be verified. I did never receive a sample of this coffee that grows as decaffeinated in nature. And we have doubts for large-scale production because caffeine is a natural defense for the plant of coffee. And so there are also some rules that set that to define a coffee as natural is something that has not been interfered by man or nothing that has been removed after an extraction process. So the definition of natural decaffeination is something that is not that goes not in the direction of the aims of these regulations. The decaf coffee market is growing quite slowly year by year because people enjoy drinking a good cup without an excessive intake. There are good consumptions in West Europe and 15% in the United States. That is the main market. And so we have also new potential market that they begin knowing what is decaf coffee. You alternate decaf and regular coffee as a way to reduce the intake of caffeine during all the day. And also there is an increase of consumption of specialty decaf coffees. Because if you decaffeinate a good quality coffee, also a specialty coffee, you maintain the same characteristics of the coffee of the beginning. And this is something that now all the industry are starting to do. The positive effects are that there is no significant difference between decaf and regular coffee. So the consumers will not recognize a decaf if it is well prepared. There is a little increased perceived acidity due to the loss of body caused by the removal of waxes and the removal of some negative flavors with the process, because the process is capable also to remove some defects as wood or earth that if are present in some coffees. But the loss of aroma is faster than regular coffee, and so there is also a lower consumption than regular. So the package might remain open for a longer time, so oxidized and rancid. So, and this is the advantage from the monoportions, pods or capsules. There is the absence in the coffee shop of a grinder dedicated to decaf, so the extraction is often not precise. That is not properly stored. If you store the decaf ground, it is consequently in contact with the air for a long period, a longer period than regular coffee.
Thank you. Thank you, Giovanni Bortoli, for thank you for your relation, and thank you for your job.